So, full disclosure, I'm the end of my 3rd year as an assistant professor at Arizona State University. I haven't been doing this for decades, like everyone else here, and I'm right in the thick of the terror of not knowing if I'm going to get enough grants to get tenure, if I'm going to be able to build these big collaborations. And I am not an expert on crowdfunding, but I have enough experience with it, and I've been working with the people at Experimentcom to get some information here for you. So largely what I'm going to do is tell you about my experience with it, some background, and then also I've talked with many other people, so I did, like a good scientist, I did my background research. I did a lot of understanding what I needed to do to be successful with this. So I'll try to keep it a little shorter so we have time for questions. No, that's fine. Great. Okay, so I'll go into just a little bit. How many of you all have crowdfunded before? All right, good. That's great. Actually, P.S., right? My Twitter handle is Wilson Sayres. I have a long last name, and the R and the E are messed up, but it's fine. So it comes into play later. A little bit about how much is there, how to get started, my case study, and then should you crowdfund? Right? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself with any funding agency. Should you devote the time to it? Right? Okay, so what is crowdfunding? So it's not government funding, it's not private foundation funding, it's not industry funding, it's not any of the things we've heard about before, right? It's truly exactly publicly funded research, people giving their money from their wallet, from things they could otherwise be spending on. They're giving you their coffee money, they're giving you directly their money. And while government funding and foundation money does come from donors or from taxes, this is literally, you see the individual people donating to you. Oh yeah, that's fine. So there has been some research done on diminishing returns of very, very large grants or labs that have tons and tons of funding. So there's this debate going on, big science versus little science. How does scientific impact scale with the amount of funding that's going? And what's largely been concluded is that impact per dollar decreases with above a certain threshold. So once grant funding gets tremendously large in a lab, you don't get the exact return in terms of productivity, in terms of publications, in terms of trainees in a lab. Right, and this is all well and good to say, easier to say when you have lots of grants. But also, there is an argument made that funding more science increases the diversity of fields of research and the range of opportunities available to students, to trainees, if we are spreading around money a little more instead of concentrating it into these big mega labs. That sounds nice to me. Right, okay. So it's about $700,000 in funding-ish is what people say. So maybe that per year, right? So an RO1 modular budget is $250,000 a year. So even at that, that's still 2 or 3 RO1s a year. That's not pocket change, right? But the point of this is that there are some labs that have just oodles of money. I don't know where they get it. But the thing to look at here, though, is that, so here's this plateau, $700,000. Where's crowdfunding sitting? Nowhere close. Not even, it's like it's a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop. It's like you dropped it in the bucket in Arizona, where I live, in the morning, and then you looked at it later, and it's kind of dried up a little bit. So $2,000 to $5,000 is typically the success rate. And I think even the 5,000 is optimistic. There are some, and I'll even show you mine, that are more successful than that, but they're extreme outliers. So if you're thinking about crowdfunding and you want to crowdfund $250,000 a year for your lab, it's not going to happen. Phylogenomics, Jonathan Eisen funded several thousands of dollars, but he has tens of thousands of Twitter followers, a tremendous following, doing kitty microbiome, right? Everybody loves cats. You can do all the memes in the world. That's great. But this isn't big money. And what I will tell you is also, it's also a lot of time. So So, right, if you're sitting here listening to me, you're thinking, okay, well, $700,000 the plateau, I'd like to get close to that. You're telling me this is not very much. Why should I even consider doing it? Well, part of it is that it does have a big success rate, right? 45%. 45% blows my mind. The agencies that I'm applying to are 7%, 10%. I recently talked with a program officer from National Science Foundation doing bioinformatics, something that I'm really interested in. She was really excited to talk about all the great applications, and she thinks she'll be able to fund 5% of them this year. How do you maintain hope with that kind of level, right? I think part of it is going in with your eyes open, that you know that it's that low, and that you're gonna have to apply a lot, and you're gonna get rejected a lot. And for me, crowdfunding is a way to keep hope alive. 45% is not bad, and there's a lot of things you can do to make it even higher, right? To be a little more successful. So what do you have to do, right? You can't just, you can go to Kickstarter, you can go to Experiment.com, you can go, there's a ton of different platforms. One, decide on your platform. Look at, right, so Experiment.com is the one that I worked with because they only allow things that are scientifically backed to be there. So Kickstarter, it could be any number of things, right? Who were they working on? Some underwater breathing apparatus that was just no chance in Phoenix. And, but it could be on there because Kickstarter will allow anything to be on there, right? And GoFundMe. But Experiment.com is really for science projects. They have to be vetted before they get on there. And there's groups of people who will fund to multiple projects. So once you've donated to one on Experiment, then you get pinged later and you say, oh, you funded to, X, Y, or Z. We think you might also be interested in T and U or whatever. There's also some local institution platforms. So my institution has one called Pitch Funder, but it's not very well known, and there were a lot of limitations on it. So you need to consider visibility, the network, the percentage cut, right? So Experiment takes 8%. Some funders take more, some of these crowdfunding. So it's not overhead, but it's under the table. I don't know. It's coming out, right? So you ask for, if you need $10,000 to your research, you need to do 10,000 plus 8%. Because they're going to take that cut. Also consider whether your institution is going to take that money, because you can take it yourself. So Experiment could have cut me a check. Now it's my income. And now I have to pay federal income taxes on it, which is some percentage. It was less for me to have them deposit it directly into an account in the university. The university is going to take their cut whether they're helping me or not. So they took 5% off of it. Okay, so we're getting money, higher success rate. But everybody's going to take a cut at some point. So you have to be aware of how much is going to come out. So you plan ahead, and you can build that into your budget. I see people say, we're asking for this much, 8% of it is going to be the fee that goes to the funder or the platform. Some have limitations for how much you can request, minimum or maximum amounts. And also consider if it's all or nothing. So that means I want to raise, again, I'll go back to $10,000. At Experiment, at many of them, if you don't make it, if I make $9,999 and I don't get that last dollar, I get none of the money. All of it goes back to the donors. So when I was doing this, I was considering amounts that, how much was in my checking account that I could make sure I could donate at the end, right? Which is like maybe not something I should admit, but if I'm not going to get any of this, if I got $8,000, right? Could I have enough to do it, right? And that's, I can't donate $2,000, but maybe I could have donated an extra $200 or something. So consider the all or nothing. And that also lets you set your threshold, because you can set stretch goals. But again, there's a psychology that comes into that, because people like to get you to your goal, and they don't like to give you above your goal, because why should we give you above your goal? Ugh, okay. What are your selling points? This is going to come up again and again and again. What's your elevator pitch? And this is true of any funding agency. Why should people care? What are your specific questions? What's your elevator pitch, right? How do you convince people that they should give you their money? And this is true of individuals. It's true of any funding agency. You need to have a media plan. That is different and distinct. So crowdfunding, those that have a video, it needs to be 3 minutes or less. And if we have time, I'll show you my 2-minute video, and you'll realize how long 2 minutes really is. When you're making it, you want to keep talking. And you're like, I have all the things to tell you, and you're watching them. 3 minutes is an eternity. Right? So typical YouTube videos, the shorter they are, the more views they'll get. Right? You need to be a little longer than 30 seconds or a minute, otherwise you don't feel like you have enough. 2 minutes is good. 3 minutes, almost too long. You need bite-sized citations. You need to prepare all of these ahead of time. You need images in action of your research, your study species, screenshots, anything you can share, anything with an image. So a video will get shared more, and short images. So also with Experiment, those projects that had a video were funded at a 60% higher rate than projects that didn't have a video. You're making it personal. You're convincing people why they should donate to you and this project. If you're a trainee, you tell them how this will finish out your PhD. If you're a postdoc, you tell them how this is going to get started. If you're a new PI, you plead. Who are you going to advertise to? All of these things you have to think about ahead of time. Networks that are interested in your research. I'll tell you about who I was thinking about for mine. Colleagues, collaborators, family, and friends. And this is where it gets a little uncomfortable. When you're crowdfunding, you're asking the people that care about you to fund this, because people that don't care about you are not going to give you $10. They either have to love the research or they have to love you. And that's very different than other kinds of funding, right? And you need to develop a base of interest. So I suggest starting to think about social media accounts, sharing updates, list of relevant organizations that might have some discretionary spending. They can give 50 or 100 or hopefully more. You need to allocate the time. So unlike a grant application, so you're going to set the start date. Typically, there's a 30-day deadline. You can have it be a little shorter, you can have it be a little longer, but typically it's 30 days. And you need to block out every day time on every day of those 30 days that you're devoting to that campaign. Hours every day. You need to be monitoring it. You need to be giving updates. You need to be responding to people, giving thank yous, right? You need to keep track if you have any rewards. So that's another consideration. Do you have anything you can give to people? Are you even allowed to? Because if they're giving a donation and you give them something of monetary value, you have to deduct that from what they're donating to you, right? This is not so easy as one might have thought when they were getting into it, and that one being me, when I thought I was getting into it, right? Prepare your thank you letter, but also personalize it for every donor. So don't just send out a generic thank you, send something based on what they said, what information they gave you, and ask them to share with their networks. So you have to be prepared to do this in real time because people need to thank you immediately. Okay, so our case study, right? So why crowdfund? For me, I've been an assistant professor for just about 3 years now, and I was looking up, I've submitted 50 grant applications to various funding agencies, internal, seed pilot money, to the Mayo Clinic, ASU, our internal department, our college, NIH, NSF, pharma. I haven't yet applied to ACS, but I'm planning on it because I'm in my 3rd year now and I have some preliminary data. I have a lot of rejections, 33 as of right now, waiting for 6 more to come in. That's where we are now, right? That's where we are. There's not much to say about it, but I knew I could get into this and I knew I had a higher chance of funding success, right? So I'll show you, at the beginning I showed you pictures of chromosomes. I do genetics, I actually study sex chromosome evolution. What I'm gonna show you is not my main thrust of my lab. I do population genetics, comparative genomics, largely looking at the role of the X and the Y chromosome, dosage compensation, how that relates to human health and well-being. But I started my lab at ASU, and my next door lab neighbor studies Gila monsters. And being a good neighbor, I walked over and I said, hey, Gila monsters, that's really cool. What kind of sex determination do they have? He's been studying them for 30 years, and he didn't know. So I started researching it. Their sex chromosomes are just the opposite of ours. They have ZW sex determination. More than that, they're really medically relevant because there's a peptide in their saliva. They're one of 2 venomous lizards. There's a peptide in their saliva used to treat type 2 diabetes. It's in a drug called exenatide. The non-generic name is Bayetta. made by AstraZeneca. I say that because someone from AstraZeneca contacted me during this, and I thought, yes. And instead, they just gave me all their material on Bayetta and wanted to know if I would share it. No, it will not. It will not. But what did I do? So I made a Gila Monster ASU Facebook page. I made a Gila Monster ASU Twitter account. I started antagonizing mammals all over the place because of all the mammalian research. I synced the accounts so that when I would post on one, it would post on the other. So I didn't have to constantly be monitoring both of those. I brainstormed lists of potential donors. So herpetological societies, type 2 diabetes organizations, zoos, reserves, Sonoran Desert reserves, places that I could go to contact who might be interested, hiking groups, any other online groups, where to post, where to ping. I prepared a logo, so my thank you was this. I sent it to everyone. It's not worth anything because we just made it. So I made my little doodle, and then I worked with a student who's really talented, and we made this Gila Monster ASU, and then I got to answer lots of questions like, do Gila Monsters really have A's, T's, G's, and C's? No, they do not. That would be very unlikely, but they do live in the desert, and they do have this wonderful beaded pattern. So I sent this along with our thank you note to everyone. So if you donated anything, then you got this. I prepared images, right? So these are beautiful Gila monsters. A lot from my collaborator who's seen them in the wild all over doing research. I made the memes, right? Things that we can share. So I'm helping cure diabetes, help conserve Gila monsters. You're welcome, human, for the successful diabetes treatments. Your friend, the Gila monster. Now let's get my genome sequenced, right? So at the time, also, there was this really sad event. In Tucson, a woman killed a Gila monster in her backyard rather graphically. And so what I did is I also made one that says, don't hate, educate, support the Gila monster genome at that time, right? So you have to constantly be aware of what's going on. They're not aggressive, right? As the adults, they actually spend most of their lives underground. And so for us, it was really trying to inform people on why Gila monsters are really interesting. This was also a year ago. And so you take advantage of what's going on. At the time, this was 1 year ago when the primaries were going on. So I made a bunch of, so if we can see this one, support Gila monster genome, venom for a cure, less venomous than most political campaigns. Instead of spewing venom, let's study venom, save our species, right? So just trying to get people to engage, to really want to know, what is this creature? Why should I care about a lizard, right? And then we started our crowdfunding campaign. So Gila Monster Genomics, conservation, venom, and treatments for type 2 diabetes. What is any aspect that I could get people to understand that having this genome is going to be a useful resource? And I made my video. And so you have to, in this, say who you are and why this is important. And we have time, yeah?
Yes.
Ugh. So the worst torture it's not the worst. That's an overselling. It is a small torture for an academic to have to hear themselves. Oops. Here we go. Okay, so here's our crowdfunding page, and you'll see that we were successful, but let me show you this. There is an amazing creature for many reasons. One of them is that it is one of only 2 venomous lizards. What's especially interesting about the Gila monster venom, though, is that there's a protein in the Gila monster venom that is being used right now in clinical trials to treat type 2 diabetes. So you might think, we have this amazing venomous lizard, it is beautiful orange and black patterns, we must know its genome, right? Wrong. We don't know anything about its genome. Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Wilson Sayres, an assistant professor of genomics, evolution, and bioinformatics here at Arizona State University. And I am thrilled that you are here watching our video and interested in supporting our efforts to sequence the Gila monster genome. As part of this crowdfunding project, you will be involved in the very first stages of investigating the Gila monster genome. We're going to generate high coverage genome sequence for one individual to serve as the reference for this species. And we're also going to be sequencing 3 males and 3 females, so we can get some idea of the diversity across the species that we could use for conservation efforts, and also so we can study their unique sex determination system. So there are more than 3,000 more species of reptiles than there are mammals, but we have 20 times as many mammalian genome sequences as we do reptile sequences. This means that if you're interested in studying reptile biology, trying to find a closely related species for comparison is extremely difficult. So it would be as if I said, let's go study the humans. The humans are so interesting, but the closest related species we have with a genome is a chicken. You're like, chicken is fine. Chicken is like a human. That's about as close of a reference as we have for the Gila Monster right now. And so if we really want to understand their biology, get at the venom protein evolution, develop resources for conservation, we need this first stage to develop a good reference genome for the Gila Monster. Thank you so much for your interest in the Gila Monster genome. I cannot convey to you how excited I am about this project. I got to touch a Gila Monster. I got to pet and feel its beady little back. They are incredible, these beaded lizards. So we're really happy and thankful for your interest and hopefully your contribution to supporting the Gila Monster Genome Project. All right, that was 2 minutes. That was incredibly long amount of time for you all to sit there and watch that and get through the whole thing. Thank you, your captive audience. But we were successful. So this was almost exactly a year ago, and we raised our goal. And so one of the nice things I just show you about this project, this has to be accessible to the public. I can't emphasize that enough. So I would say gear it towards a 7th grade understanding of science, right? People may have had biology, they may have had science, but they may have forgotten it. So you want to make it accessible. So questions, what are the contexts, the significance? What's your budget? How do you justify, right? So these are actually threads that run through everything. 1, why is your research interesting? How can you make it accessible to someone who's not specifically in your field? And exactly how are you going to spend the money? So you need to be very specific in everything that you're going to spend. We set a stretch goal. So everything here was our original goal, and we made that. And so we set a stretch goal. And I will tell you, reaching the stretch goal was a disaster. Nobody wanted to fund it after we made our original goal. So I think you may be better off trying to get a second crowdfunding campaign going after the first time. But it is really difficult to try to gauge how much you're going to be able to do. You get endorsements from people who are in the field. So I actually, these are not people that I collaborate with, but who I sent them my project. I sent them why I was doing that. I asked them if they thought it was interesting, if they would provide me an endorsement. And then I have my team, my collaborators, the students in the lab. So we kind of had everyone there. And then the last thing is that you're actually also you're not done once you get the funding. You need to continually provide updates to people. So we have these lab notes. So I showed people when we collected the blood, how we did it. I tried to tell them what we were doing for each of them. I need to give an update now based on the sequencing, trying to educate people into the methodology while we're doing it. And we also were featured in The Atlantic as a consequence of this. So people found out about it, and the story came out after the crowdfunding was over. It would have been great to have it before, but we still got some press for this particular project, which was really great. And so, yeah, there's our Gila Monster. And another thing is that I was approached by a company during this crowdfunding campaign who wanted to do their particular library prep. So they're a startup company. They're doing a specific library prep, and they wanted to donate their library prep, which cost almost as much as we raised here. So that is kind of an added benefit. By you're not only doing outreach, you're raising awareness about your project, but someone might find it and have some other, not exactly funding, but other ways to support the project. Okay. So we'll go back to this, and then we'll end in 3 minutes, I promise. Right, so your video is important. Oh yeah, and then there's a woman who made something called a Sonoran Desert Balloon Party, and it had a Gila Monster there, so I asked her for that so we could use it to celebrate when we won. So my thoughts, right? It's great for building interest. You get to answer questions directly. So I had anybody who was donating could email me questions about the project. I could build a profile for the project. It extended to these other collaborations that we've built, and there's a high rate of success. So you can have stretch goals. So these are all great things. Not so great. Asking for money is really uncomfortable. Every single day of the campaign, you're asking people for money. It's not one grant application that goes to a committee. You're asking lots of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, if they would donate. All or nothing is stressful. it's a lot of work for not a ton of money, and it's difficult to push past your original goal. So should you crowdfund? I guess I would say, do you have a specific question? Can you make people care about it? Do you need a small amount of money? Or are you extremely well connected? Do you have the time to devote to self-promotion? Because that's really what it is. You're advocating for yourself and your research. And can you ask people for money over and over and over and over again? Because that's what this 30 days is. You're trying to get these small denominations to add up to something big. With that, I will say we were super thrilled. We thank the 173 people that donated to back our campaign. We also have gotten a little bit of funding from other things, but largely, I think the most number of backers really is this crowdfunding campaign. So if you have questions about this or how not to be eaten alive by stress as an assistant professor, I am happy to answer that. Thank you, everybody.